Hello, I'm Jonasz Rowiński and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. Ukraine is in the middle of an attritional war against Russia. As cities are being shelled, people are being killed by the relentless Russian assault. There is also lots of political maneuvering going on behind the lines, in the background, as it were. So the big question right now remains, will Ukraine be able to withstand this attack, while at the same time also defending itself against some ill-advised peace proposals, which could lead to more war later on, further down the line? We're going to talk about this and more with our guest today, Mikhail Alexseev, professor at the San Diego State University. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, good to be here.
So let us begin with the nature of warfare right now. It is attritional, but the big question is who has what kind of problems? Let's begin with Russia. Apparently Russia has a tank problem.
Yes, the footage that you showed is very apt. We see also Russia using less tanks on the front lines. We see in some areas the main tank being used is 262 tank. And as you mentioned, T-55 is even being taken out of storage. When the Russian defense minister gives the numbers of new tanks that Russia, quote unquote, produces or makes ready for the front, he also had been including the tanks taken out of storage, and those go back to World War II. So in that sense, yes. However, we also have noted other things. For instance, Russia has a problem with artillery, with barrels for its artillery, because it has been firing enormous number of shells. For instance, yesterday, according to the Ukrainian General Staff, 4,400 artillery strikes on Russia. So, and Russia doesn't have much technology to rapidly repair or produce new barrels for mainline artillery. So these are some of the problems that Russia has. It is depleting Russian reserves. It doesn't, however, seem to have yet made a big dent in Russian manpower. We still see Russia being able to recruit probably about 25,000 troops a month and send to the front. But at the same time, we also see potentially coming problems with manpower unless another mobilization happens, with the mayor of Moscow announcing the reward of $22,000 for somebody going to the front immediately, and then going up to $60,000. So that's the fact that Russia goes and tries to send more people to the front line, actually from Moscow, is an indicator there.
So overall, Russia, quantity over quality, museum pieces on the front line, troops charging the Ukrainian positions using electric scooters, motorbikes and golf buggies manufactured in China. I mean, we've seen the footage from the front line. Now, you've mentioned the question of manpower. Ukraine also has this problem. It is made especially acute because obviously Russia is much more populous. So what is Ukraine doing to address this particular issue?
Well, as you know, Ukraine passed the new law on mobilization. It decreased the age for drafting men into the Ukrainian armed forces. According to the data I obtained a few days ago, there were probably reports from the Ukrainian government about 4 million people registered and re-registered for military service. It's not all. There are still a lot of people who have not, but we now see continuing registrations. So we do see that problem partially addressed. However, this is a more serious problem for Ukraine because it has 4 or 5 times less population than Russia, and Russia also causes big damage on Ukrainian front lines. One of the major advantages that Russia has that have caused a lot of losses on the front in Ukraine are the glide bombs, the guided air-launched glide bombs. Yesterday, 132 of those were launched in 96 airstrikes. And once they are released, they're very hard to hit. They're actually impossible to hit. They fly at a very sharp angle. They are half a ton to 1.5 tons, and now Russia has been producing new ones. Reports are saying that 3-ton bombs are coming online. So when they hit the target, they glide and they erase a large area. And so, of course, for Ukraine to defend its positions on the front line is much harder, and the losses are also higher. But Ukraine has another problem aside from manpower, it's electricity.
So you've mentioned the glide bombs being used and they are being difficult to intercept. But there is a way in which Ukraine could strike back, attacking the airfields, except Western countries are not allowing their weapons to be used for this. And so effectively, the ongoing destruction of civilian areas using these glide bombs with an increasing capacity up to 3 tons, as you've mentioned, it is a thing, right? So do you think that finally Western countries are going to give in? For the time being, the United States administration says not really. Poland's foreign minister encourages leaders of the European Union to lift these restrictions. Do you think it's going to happen now that we know that the Russian escalation warnings, they don't really amount to much effectively?
Well, every point you made is absolutely valid. And I do hear a lot more people in the United States. I hear military analysts and former military and some officials saying that it's important to be able for Ukraine to hit the archer rather than trying to shoot every arrow that is flying at Ukraine, which is impossible. And we also remember that Antony Blinken, when the United States authorized the use of U.S. longer-range weapons against Russian forces over the border in the northern part of Ukraine, in Kharkiv, he said that we're going to continue to monitor the situation and adapt. And my sense is that the chances are potentially good on allowing more targeted strikes further afield, particularly, I think, with the political changes that are happening right now in the White House.
So effectively, Russia is counting on basically benefiting from a sort of safe space during the war, like Ukraine is not allowed to strike these targets. I mean, this sounds rather absurd, but also brings me to the next question. You've already mentioned the possible political change. Whichever way it goes, there is going to be a political discussion on what the future of the war is going to be. Now, do you think that currently the situation on the front line is actually informed by this, i.e. both sides, Ukraine and Russia, trying to position themselves ahead of the inevitable, some sort of negotiations? The big question is, what kind of negotiations are those going to be? What conditions will there be? And also, which of the two sides is going to have the upper hand? So what do you think is going to happen now?
Well, if we had two ideal rational actors in this game who saw war as some form of bargaining and were able to stop it at any time to reach some kind of compromise, then yeah, we can analyze the situation in this way. But unfortunately, in this situation, we have a very determined expansionist dictator, Putin, who hasn't stopped at anything to advance his goals in Ukraine, short of using some major weapons of mass destruction, and so, which of course would defeat his purpose. So in that situation, the problem is that even signaling the West's willingness to compromise, even attempts to negotiate, send a message to Moscow that Ukraine is potentially weak, and that reduces the incentive for Putin to have any kind of bargain to begin with. Not to mention that there is a huge difference in objectives. For Ukraine, the withdrawal of Russian forces from most of the territories it occupied, not just since 2024, but since 2014, is paramount. In opinion surveys that I have been conducting with the Institute of Sociology and in focus groups we have been doing there, the response is very, very adamant that this is Ukrainian territory, that this is international law, and that a kind of peace deal, that ceasefire that may emerge, would be much more threatening for Ukraine, because Putin is going to amass more forces and continue attacking. So there is, even though you mentioned some results, and I know these results, that there is a sort of softening on the issue of territorial concessions. It's still we still have about 2/3 of Ukrainians who do not accept any concessions. And you have close to 90%, around 90% of Ukrainians who want Ukraine to be a free and independent state. And Russia doesn't want Ukraine to be a free and independent state. It, in essence, wants to be a Russian dependency in whatever territorial shape or form it may exist.
And they continue to make it clear, like recently Dmitry Medvedev said, after a ceasefire, be prepared for Ukraine to be subsumed into Russian territory at one point or another. So they don't really have peaceful designs for Ukraine. Now, for final question, you've mentioned the change at the White House. Which option do you believe would be better? Which of the current candidates is likely to be more hawkish when it comes to dealing with Russia?
Well, this is a very interesting question because on the one hand, if Kamala Harris gets nominated formally as the Democratic candidate and wins the election, she is more likely to continue strong support for NATO, building Euro-Atlantic alliance. Ukraine is central to this project, so we can expect the push for continuing and maybe even stronger support and more bold support for Ukraine because a lot of delays and restrictions on the US side came personally from Biden in the course of the last 2.5 years of the war. If Donald Trump wins, on the one hand, he pursues the isolationist America First policy, and there's even danger that he may weaken or even abandon US relations with NATO. But at the same time, Trump is a volatile personality who hates to be seen as a loser, and if he sees his efforts to end the war in Ukraine with some kind of instant compromise, putting pressure on both sides, fail, and Putin persevering, if Trump sees himself as a loser, he may actually give more aid and more decisive aid to Ukraine.
So overall, Kamala Harris, safe investment. Donald Trump, a bit of a dice roll there, but it still remains to be seen what the result of the election is going to be. Mikhail Alexseev was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your expertise.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm Jan Ślewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.